August 2023. Henderson, Nevada. A quiet suburb, far from the noise and crowds of the casino district. On the morning of August 7th, around 8 o'clock, a woman named Yoko looks out the window. She spots the pickup truck belonging to her 46-year-old son, Jonathan Willett. The vehicle is parked outside the house, even though Jonathan is supposed to be overseeing a major commercial relocation project that morning. He owns a logistics company and is known for sticking to his schedule without exception. Yoko heads downstairs and immediately notices that something feels off. The dogs are locked in the backyard, continuously howling. The garage door is open. A chair is lying overturned on the living room floor. Light is coming from the bedroom. Before we find out what was behind that door, let me take a quick moment to say something. Every case featured here is based on real criminal investigations. The story is built strictly from documented and verified facts, with no fictional additions. If you appreciate that approach, consider supporting the channel with a subscription and any form of engagement. It genuinely helps me continue researching new cases and producing more content. Now, back to that morning. Yoko walks into the room. On the bed is a person wrapped tightly in several layers of blankets. Only a pair of feet and a trembling hand are visible. She pulls at the fabric, trying to wake her son. The moment she sees what is hidden beneath the blankets, she panics and calls emergency services. Following protocol, the dispatcher asks her to check whether the victim is breathing. Yoko responds. He doesn't have a face. He doesn't have a neck. Police officers arrive at the scene. Sergeant Forrest Shield steps into the bedroom and immediately stops in his tracks. The air is filled with a powerful odor of ammonia and bleach. At the same time, the walls appear unusually clean, with no visible traces of blood anywhere in the room. Officers shine their flashlights toward the bed. Jonathan's body is literally giving off steam. An active chemical reaction is still underway. A corrosive substance is breaking down tissue, and the mattress appears to be deteriorating before their eyes. During the initial examination, investigators note the complete absence of any weapon connected to the crime. Jonathan's phone, keys, and wallet are gone. But one detail leaves detectives struggling to make sense of the scene. The person responsible had taken the victim's head. A question immediately emerges. How could someone carry out something like this while another person was asleep upstairs and leave behind virtually no biological evidence inside the room? To understand who would have reason to turn a crime scene into what looked like a chemical laboratory, you first have to look at Jonathan's life. Willett never fit the stereotype of a Las Vegas resident spending nights at poker tables and casino floors. He was born in Tokyo to a military family. From an early age, he grew up with strict discipline and learned to rely on himself. After moving to Nevada, he spent more than 2 decades working on the famous Las Vegas Strip. There, he sold timeshare packages to tourists. It's a job that demands exceptional resilience, tremendous charisma, and the ability to connect with virtually anyone. After building enough startup capital, Jonathan launched a recruiting agency that helped local residents find work. Then, Shortly before the pandemic began, he started the logistics company that would later be the reason his mother became concerned when he failed to show up. The business grew quickly. Even high-profile clients came on board, including actor Jamie Foxx. Jonathan was the definition of a workaholic, but he was also someone his family could always rely on for support and protection. But behind the image of a successful entrepreneur was a personal life that had completely fallen apart. At the center of that ongoing turmoil was 45-year-old Devin Michaels. Years earlier, she had appeared in adult entertainment productions under the stage names Nikki and Tressie. Their marriage began in 2012 and, by all accounts, felt like a non-stop roller coaster. The couple had 2 daughters together, but by 2018 the relationship had completely broken down, leading to a difficult and bitter divorce. After that, things only became more complicated. In October 2022, Devin was arrested following allegations involving the mistreatment of her daughters. The court sided with Jonathan and granted him sole custody of the girls. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to close that chapter forever, change the locks, and finally move on with his life. And honestly, that would seem like the logical ending to a toxic marriage. But this is where one of the most common patterns in cases like this begins to appear. The target of the aggression often struggles to let go of the person causing it. Jonathan was determined to preserve the image of a normal family for the sake of his daughters. He constantly tried to play the role of peacemaker. Despite court restrictions and repeated warnings, he continued making compromises. He ignored boundaries, bent the rules, and allowed Devin to spend time with the girls. He genuinely believed he could manage the situation and smooth things over. That confidence in his ability to fix everything created a major gap in his own safety. Without realizing it, he allowed the threat back into his life. And he had no idea that his ex-wife had gained a new and highly unexpected ally. Several months before the events we're discussing, the truth about that secret ally finally came to light. It was Deaver Willett, Jonathan's oldest son from a previous relationship. By 2023, Deaver was 26 years old. He was an imposing man, standing close to 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighing well over 180 pounds. He worked as a security systems technician, had extensive knowledge of electronics, and was comfortable handling heavy-duty tools. For many years, father and son were inseparable. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, their relationship came to an abrupt end. The reason behind this conflict completely breaks the social norms most people take for granted. I review cases involving financial motives all the time, but in this situation, investigators found themselves dealing with something that looked like a genuine family anomaly. Deaver eventually confessed something shocking to his father. He had secretly married Devin. In other words, Jonathan's son had legally married his father's former wife. There was an 18-year age gap between them, and the facts later suggested that their relationship may have begun when Deaver was 19 years old. In a single moment, he had legally become the stepfather of his own younger sisters on his father's side of the family. Deaver tried to explain it away. He told Jonathan that the marriage was purely administrative, arranged for insurance purposes, and that there was no physical relationship between them. Jonathan did not take the news well. He sent Deaver a text message filled with anger, disbelief, and frustration. Most people, after learning something like that, would have cut all ties immediately and shown everyone involved the door. But Jonathan made a decision that went completely against basic self-preservation. His determination to keep the family together for the sake of his daughters outweighed logic. He came up with a plan that, even in hindsight, seems difficult to understand. He wanted everyone living under the same roof. Jonathan intended to move his daughters, his son, and his former wife into a house together in the quiet North Cheyenne area of northwest Las Vegas. He personally organized the move, rented the home, and packed the boxes himself. During those days of preparation, Deaver was often nearby, but he carefully avoided making eye contact with his father. Meanwhile, Jonathan genuinely believed he could repair the damage and bring everyone back together. On the evening of August 6th, the day before Jonathan's body was discovered, preparations for the move were nearly complete. Jonathan and Devin arrived at Yoko's home to spend the night. They settled into a first-floor bedroom. Later that evening, Devin offered to give her former husband a massage after a long day of work. She also had what appeared to be a legitimate medical reason for avoiding intimacy. She had recently undergone a gynecological procedure. That explanation provided the perfect opportunity to have Jonathan lie face down with his back toward her and lower his guard completely. Now let's return to the morning of August 7th. While forensic specialists worked to safely collect evidence inside Yoko's bedroom, which had been saturated with chemical substances, investigators focused their attention on the primary suspect. Detectives headed to the home of Devin Michaels. The residence was located roughly 25 miles from where Jonathan's body had been found. The reasoning was straightforward. Devin was the last known person to be in the same room with Jonathan, and she was also the person who left the house late that night. Police officers arrive at the address and almost immediately stumble onto their first major break in the case, and it happens right out in the open. At that moment, Jonathan and Devin's daughters are playing in the driveway. The girls are the first to notice a cell phone lying on the ground near their mother's vehicle, a 2017 Nissan Armada. They instantly recognize it as their father's phone. When officers pick up the device, they notice a distinct dark brown stain on the screen. A preliminary examination indicates that the substance is blood. You know, after reviewing countless investigations, I keep running into the same paradox. Think about this for a second. Why would someone spend so much effort eliminating evidence inside a room, use powerful chemical agents, and go to extraordinary lengths to conceal what happened, yet leave a blood-stained phone sitting next to their own vehicle where anyone could find it? Was it a simple mistake caused by exhaustion after a sleepless night? Or was it a sign that the person responsible believed they were smarter than everyone else? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that contradiction in the comments. The discovery of the phone, along with biological evidence on it, gives investigators solid grounds to obtain an emergency search warrant. As soon as the warrant is approved, detectives enter the house. They begin a careful room-by-room search. Inside Devin's bedroom, investigators eventually reach a dresser filled with personal belongings. At the very bottom of one drawer, hidden beneath stacks of underwear, detectives discover a plastic bag tied shut with a tight knot. Inside the bag are Jonathan's keys, his wallet, and his social security card. These were items he routinely carried with him. At the same time, another team of investigators is examining objects in a nearby room. On a shelf, they come across a brand new photo album. They open it and find recent wedding photographs. In the pictures, Devon is posing in a white dress beside a groom who is kissing her on the cheek. That groom is Dever. For investigators, this becomes documented proof of the secret marriage between the former stepmother and stepson. The discovery completely changes the direction of the investigation. The victim's personal belongings had been carefully hidden among clothing, and investigators now had evidence confirming the relationship between Jonathan's former wife and his son. At that point, it becomes clear that this was not a spontaneous argument that spiraled into an unexpected outcome. Investigators begin documenting what appears to be a coordinated family conspiracy. Now detectives face a new challenge. They need to determine exactly how responsibilities were divided between the two suspects. Their goal is to establish, through documented evidence, who handled the instrument connected to the crime, and to reconstruct the movements of both individuals in the hours surrounding the incident. On August 15th, a little more than a week after Jonathan's body was discovered, detectives bring Devon to the Henderson Police Department for a formal interview. At first, she appears remarkably confident, almost to the point of arrogance. When investigators directly ask how a fresh bloodstain ended up on her former husband's cell phone, she offers the most ordinary explanation possible. According to Devon, while packing boxes for the move, Jonathan accidentally cut his hand and unknowingly transferred blood onto the phone's screen. But detectives already have a preliminary medical report sitting on the table in front of them. The medical examiner's findings are clear. Jonathan's hands showed no cuts, no scrapes, no abrasions, and no signs of any recent injury. Her first story falls apart right there in the interview room. Realizing that denying the evidence is no longer an option, Devon quickly changes direction. She admits that she was in the bedroom that night and immediately introduces a new version of events, one built entirely around self-defense. According to her account, while she was giving Jonathan a massage, he allegedly engaged in inappropriate and unacceptable behavior. Fearing aggression, she says she grabbed a heavy metal candlestick, struck him once in the head, and then ran from the room in panic. Devon insists that when she left, Jonathan was still alive and breathing normally. One thing I find fascinating in case after case is how often people underestimate their digital footprint. They create elaborate explanations, rehearse detailed stories, and invent entire conversations. But they forget about the silent electronic witnesses surrounding them. First, investigators obtain cell phone records from wireless carriers. The data reveals that the victim's phone and Devon's phone traveled through the city together, following the exact same route until approximately 2:45 in the morning. Second, Forensic technicians recover information from her vehicle's multimedia system. An electronic travel log known as trip log records the precise moment the engine starts. According to the onboard computer, the vehicle did not leave Yoko's house until 2:04 a.m. That creates a serious problem for Devon's version of events. It means she remained at the scene for hours, not minutes, after the incident occurred. And finally, the most damaging contradiction comes from surveillance footage collected from city cameras. At approximately 2:30 a.m., video captures Devon at the drive-through window of a 24-hour pharmacy making a purchase. She appears completely calm. She's wearing a bright white tank top and light blue shorts. Investigators notice something important. There are no visible stains, no signs of chemical residue, and nothing about her appearance suggests someone who had just fled the chaotic scene she later described to detectives. Detectives now face a major logical problem. It's physically impossible to injure someone, spend hours inside a room saturated with chemical substances, and then appear under bright street cameras, wearing spotless white clothing without a trace of contamination. As the investigation moved forward, the profile of the person responsible increasingly pointed toward the second participant in the secret marriage. In November 2025, this complicated case finally reaches a courtroom in Clark County. What follows is a legal battle that forces everyone involved to take another look at the investigation. Originally, prosecutors offered Devon Michaels a plea agreement. The deal called for a guilty plea to second-degree charges related to the crime in exchange for a fixed 15-year sentence. But the defendant made what many observers considered a massive tactical mistake. She withdrew her agreement and chose to take her chances before a jury, maintaining that she was completely innocent. The defense responds with an aggressive strategy. Instead of focusing on Devon, her attorneys redirect attention toward the one person who seemed to fit the profile of the actual perpetrator better than anyone else. They present facts that, according to the defense, investigators had largely overlooked during the early stages of the case. During the trial, jurors are shown years of private messages and photographs involving Devon and Dever. The evidence reveals that their secret relationship had lasted for more than 7 years. Jonathan's sudden plan to move everyone into the same household threatened to disrupt everything. According to testimony presented in court, Jonathan intended to remove Dever from the living arrangement. From the defense perspective, Dever had an obvious motive: jealousy, the possibility of losing his comfortable lifestyle, and the fear of being separated from the woman he loved. At this stage of the trial, it's hard not to notice how strategically family relationships are being used inside the courtroom. The defense is essentially turning two secret partners against each other in an effort to protect their client at the expense of her own husband. The defense also focuses heavily on physical capability. Attorneys ask jurors a straightforward question: could a woman of Devon's size realistically act alone against a physically strong adult man and then move evidence without assistance? They remind the jury that Dever worked with security systems and had extensive experience using construction and technical equipment. He also understood camera systems and knew how surveillance blind spots worked. Even more notably, when investigators searched his residence, they discovered a large collection of power tools and equipment. According to the defense, those items were never thoroughly examined for possible DNA evidence, despite their potential relevance to the case. For a moment, it looked like the defense had successfully planted doubt. The jury appeared to have a reason to hesitate. The defense had carefully crafted the image of a frightened woman who was pressured into helping conceal the aftermath of a crime allegedly committed by the victim's son. But the prosecution wasn't about to back down. The final answer to the question of who was truly driving events behind the scenes came from an unexpected source: a recorded jail phone call. Prosecutors played a conversation between Devon and Dever that had been captured while she was being held in custody. During the call, Devon breaks down in tears and tells her young husband that investigators don't really have anything substantial against her, just a bottle of cleaning solution. Dever's response is strikingly cold. There is no sign of concern, loyalty, or partnership. He tells her that he's moving to California and that their relationship is over. In an instant, he distances himself from his wife, leaving her to face the justice system alone and dismantling one of the defense's last remaining arguments. To eliminate any lingering uncertainty, prosecutors carefully reconstruct the events of August 6th. That evening, Jonathan lies down on a bed in the first-floor bedroom, while Devon begins the massage she had offered earlier. According to toxicology findings presented in court, Jonathan had alcohol and tetrahydrocannabinol in his system. The results suggested that he was deeply relaxed. His reactions were slowed, and before long he drifted into a heavy sleep. At that point, his size and physical strength no longer carried the same advantage. Prosecutors argued that significant physical force was not required. According to their reconstruction, a single well-placed strike with a heavy object was enough to leave him unable to respond. Evidence presented in court suggested there was no meaningful struggle. After becoming convinced that her former husband was no longer alive, Devon allegedly moved into the next stage of her plan. According to the prosecution, a reciprocating saw was later used as part of efforts to alter and conceal evidence. And this is where investigators found the answer to one of the case's biggest questions: how her clothing remained so clean. The medical examiner testified that the extensive alteration of the remains occurred after death. Because circulation had already stopped, the scene unfolded very differently from what many people imagine. That medical explanation, prosecutors argued, helped account for why Devon's white tank top and light blue shorts showed no obvious signs of contamination. I've covered a lot of calculated crimes, but one detail in this case stands out: the ability to carry out a methodical cleanup and then calmly hold a casual conversation with the victim's mother only minutes later is the kind of behavior that even experienced investigators find deeply unsettling. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, a moment occurs that prosecutors later pointed to as evidence of that composure. Yoko wakes up feeling thirsty and walks downstairs to the kitchen. She turns on the light and sees Devon calmly washing dishes. She asks about her son. In a soft, steady voice, Devon tells her that Jonathan had too much to drink, was exhausted, and should be allowed to rest. No panic. No emotional breakdown. Nothing that seemed unusual. Reassured, Yoko returns to bed, unaware that a devastating crime scene was just beyond the neighboring door. Once alone again, the person responsible allegedly continued cleaning the scene. Investigators testified that large amounts of ammonia and bleach were used in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. The chemicals reacted with one another, damaging portions of the mattress. The same toxic fumes that would later overwhelm responding officers the following morning gradually filled the room throughout the night. At 2:04 a.m., Devon walks out of the house. She takes several items with her: Jonathan's keys, his wallet, and a plastic laundry basket. According to prosecutors, concealed inside that basket was a critical piece of evidence connected to the crime. Devon gets into her sport utility vehicle and drives away, leaving behind the locked dogs and the heavily damaged bedroom. After surveillance footage and toxicology evidence dismantled the self-defense narrative, prosecutors presented what they considered the strongest piece of evidence in the entire case. Throughout the trial, the defense repeatedly argued that any handling of Jonathan's personal belongings had been carried out by Dever. But detectives returned to the plastic bags recovered from the bottom drawer of Devon's dresser, the same bags containing Jonathan's keys and wallet. A forensic specialist takes the stand. Using laboratory findings, the expert confirms that genetic material belonging to the defendant was recovered from the tightly tied knots on those bags. The defense attempts to suggest accidental DNA transfer. The expert responds with a statistical analysis. According to the findings presented in court, the probability that someone else tied those knots was approximately 1 in 90 octillion. That's a number containing 27 zeros. Faced with evidence that's specific, there was little room for debate. On November 14th, 2025, the jury returns a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree charges related to the crime. Then, on January 8th, 2026, the judge delivers the sentence. Emphasizing the calculated nature of the act and declining to show leniency, the court imposes a sentence ranging from 28 years to life in prison. By rejecting the earlier 15-year plea agreement, Devon had gambled on a different outcome. Instead, she lost everything. Today, she is serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Nevada. Dever remained free because investigators were unable to establish conclusive physical evidence tying him directly to the commission of the crime itself. Jonathan's daughters are now being raised by their grandparents, but one dark chapter of this case remains unresolved. The businessman was laid to rest without every question being answered. How did investigators determine the route taken by the missing piece of evidence if Devon refused to provide any information? The answer came from the vehicle's onboard computer. That same trip log system not only recorded the time the vehicle departed, but also documented the exact coordinates of each stop. During the night in question, the vehicle paused near a set of ordinary trash dumpsters inside Devon's residential neighborhood. Investigators concluded that this location was likely where evidence connected to the crime had been discarded. Police officers and volunteers searched extensively. They examined landfill sites, reviewed waste collection routes, and processed enormous amounts of refuse. Despite those efforts, they never recovered what they were looking for. And so, one of the biggest questions from that night remains unanswered. To this day, that final secret remains locked away with the person convicted in the case.